Welcome to the Dr. Franken Steve Podcast with your host, Dr. Frank Williams and Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS, where we discuss a broad range of topics without limitations. Let's get to it. Here's Dr. Frank and Dr. Steve.
Hello, welcome. This is the Dr. Franken Steve Podcast. Today's podcast is a little different. It's about art, but a different kind of art. We're going to be covering tattoos, the medical implications of them, the social and secular education, as well as I'm going to cover some of the area for those that would like to see it from a biblical standpoint as far as what the Bible has to say, and then not telling you what is or is not right, but just what the Bible says and what a lot of theologians and historians think as far as being a Christian and having tattoos. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Steve here start right off and go into his medical portion of tattoos, the inking and all that. So Steve, if you want to start us off, you can.
Welcome everybody. As Frank said, this is about tattoos, but one of the things that we're always about is informed consent. I want to make sure that everybody fully understands the meaning of informed consent. And let's just talk about it just for a second, because in my opinion, anytime that you break the skin and you're injecting something into the human body, I myself consider that a medical procedure. Some people don't, some governments don't actually. But to me, is if you shave an area of your body, you prep it, and then you stick a needle in it and inject some sort of contrast material or dye or any ink, whatever, I constitute that as you're breaking the skin, that's a medical procedure. Because if also things can go wrong when you do that. So when somebody goes to get a tattoo and you sign the documents or whatever you're signing, the issue here that's coming up in the news most recently, it's a new study from Lund University in Sweden said that people with tattoos have a higher risk, about a 21% higher risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the problem with all of this right now is that the content of the ink is not standardized or regulated. And so you really don't know what you're getting. So like when you're getting ready to have surgery, which actually I'm getting ready to have surgery tomorrow, but I can give you a great example of informed consent. It was several years ago, I had a hernia operation, and I went through it was a laparoscopic hernia operation, and the surgeon went through anything and everything that could go wrong, and there's a clause in there that says like, if I can't do it, if the surgeon says like, based on my ability, if I cannot do this through the laparoscope, then I reserve the right to fully open and do a procedure with a big open cut. And I was I had a lot of things going on at the time, and I decided to have the surgery, but I said, I'll sign the informed consent, but I will not allow you to do the open cut, the real big open cut. Like if you can't get it through the scope, then abort. Yeah. So, but the thing about it is this informed consent is like when we're surgeons, we're going to tell you, okay, here's the operation that we have planned. Here's what's going to happen most likely if you don't have the surgery. Here's what's going to happen if you do have the surgery. Here's the risk and benefits of that. And so we go through that step by step, so that patient, or they are at least given the explanation of anything and everything that can go on. And the way this is now, when you do the research on it, the ink content is unregulated, and some of the people have done studies on some of these inks, and found that their mislabeled ingredients are not labeled, but they're really in there. And so basically what you're looking at on the tattoo is that you've got the colorant, which is like a solid, and then you have the carrier, which is a liquid. And some of these liquids have even been like glycerin, water, some say like antifreeze, formaldehyde. So I mean, there's a lot of different things being reported out there. And basically, what you're doing on a tattoo is that there's three major layers of the skin. There's the epidermis, then there's the dermis, and then there's the subcutaneous tissue. And what is going on is that tattoo artist is injecting ink into your dermis. It's not the epidermis, it's the dermis. So it's about 1 to 2 millimeters in depth under the epidermis. So that to me constitutes an invasive procedure. And what happens is when that is injected, then the immune response kicks in because the body knows that it's been injured. And so it's going to release everything to try to heal that wound. And that includes like mast cells and white blood cells and that sort of thing. And so you kick into that whole immune system triggering mechanism that now is active. And so there's a lot of different discussions about where do these particles go. And it gets very complex because once you inject, the lymphatic system, some of this ink is picked up by cells and carried through the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system are vessels that parallel your blood vessels, like your arteries and your veins. But the lymphatic vessels, there's about 2 times more lymph fluid in the body than there is blood, to show you what kind of volume, what you're looking at here. And it helps control the immune system as well as hormone balances and getting rid of foreign bodies like bacteria, viruses, and in this case, ink.
So, and we'll pop up for you in the video here. We can take a look here and see that the lymphatic system, this is just a still shot for you, so you know that. And it's not, again, that we're condemning tattoos or condemning the people that get tattoos or the tattoo artists. The industry has been growing at an exponential rate over the last probably 20 years. As a matter of fact, currently under like Pew Research and different study groups, it's about a $3 billion a year industry, which that's pretty hefty, for that type of industry. And the average, monthly revenue for a tattoo artist or parlor is somewhere between $5,000 and $25,000 a month. So that's not a small thing. And between, I think it's around a study done from 2018 to 2023, again through Pew Research, there's probably about 39,000 employees currently that work in that industry. So it's not a small industry, it's not a small business if you look at it. And we're talking about here in the United States, not globally necessarily, because every country has their own issues and their own regulations. Most states have some type of regulations or issues built into there. But you take a look at who is getting tattoos, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but by generation, we'll talk about, which generation is the #1 for getting tattoos, which most people can assume who that would be, and who has brought it into the mainstream and everything. So it's fascinating to me, but as Steve said, I've been with several people I've trained over the years. I went with the military, and with guys, and we'd be out for the weekend or something, and they would get hammered, drunk. And next thing you know, they're on base the next day, either holding their arm, they've got some kind of patch over their chest, or they got something somewhere, and I'm like, what is the name of that? That was the barmaid. So now they got the barmaid. Then when they get a new woman, I'll see them maybe 6 months, a year later. I'll see that same tattoo with a line through it, and they got their new woman's name there. I said, I hope you don't go through a lot of women. You're going to be in trouble. I said, either that, you're going to have to get something made out of it. Get somebody with a simple name like A, so you can make like a design out of it or something. But but the tattoo industry has come a long way, and is actually trying to break in and doing a fairly decent job of breaking into the fine art community, into artworks and galleries. And I know a lot of people are like, well, how does that mean? Because you can't have somebody, you have still frame artists, which means they go there and actually stand there showing their tattoo. You have photographic images of a lot of tattoo artists now, especially some of the more well-known Japanese artists will photograph their clientele and then show that at different collections at art galleries and art galas around the world. So it's really becoming mainstream and is becoming more acceptable, but that just means that it needs to actually be more regulated, as Steve was saying. So as he'll get into here in a second about what he thinks should happen. But I happen to agree with him because I've known people who have had to go get those things removed, and it's not a pleasant experience. And as a matter of fact, I think on social media here recently, what was his name? Jelly Roll just had some type of infection from, bad ink or something that you had in, because you really don't know. And I agree with Steve, if you're going to have the industry, I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent, you really need to make sure everything is regulated in that, because you of all people know if you've got dirty instruments or instruments that aren't sterilized properly and everything isn't done correctly. And again, I'm not trying to knock somebody out of their profession, but just to make sure that everybody is above board, because there are some absolutely brilliant artists out there that can do tattoos and that stuff. And that's, God bless them, they're bolder, and I don't want to be sitting there, you want me drawing on your body. As I told you, I'm a little more autistic than artistic, so you might want a rose and it might come out looking like a toe or something, so you don't want that.
Well, the thing is, again, we're not trying to get tattoos banned by any means. My main thing, basically, as I've progressed through these 66 years, is that you want to informed consent is just an absolute must. It's a must in your finances. You need to know exactly what's going on. It's the same as it is if you're having some sort of medical procedure. You need to know what's going on. And physicians, especially surgeons, are held to unbelievably high standards, and we should be, because what we're doing is extremely invasive. Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is that people are signing these consents, and now we're finding that we just don't know what's in those preparations. And when you're getting that injected in your body, and now they're finding that you have an increased risk for cancer, I mean, it ought to give everybody a pause. Mm-hmm. And say like, wait a minute, do I really want this? Why do I want this? And there's going to be people that say, oh, well, he doesn't understand. Sure, I don't understand. It's your personal thing. If you want to get it, get it. But you need to know exactly what you're getting, because, again, you need to know how these instruments sterilized. Have you ever had a case of where somebody has gotten HIV or hepatitis? And what is your personal experience as a tattoo artist? How many complications or problems have you seen? Of course, there's bacterial infections. I mean, again, Jelly Roll said that. Mm-hmm. But the viral infections such as hepatitis and HIV, and then you get into a lot of things now to where cancer is being looked at. And one of the things that I found interesting is that something that may be in the ink and it's fine, but then once it's injected in the skin and it's exposed to UV light, or if it's exposed to laser light, some different things can happen where these compounds that were deemed safe mm-hmm. are now no longer so. So there's a lot of things that are being studied right now, and just saying like some of these particles are broken down into nanoparticles and can literally go throughout the body. And I've got several tattooed patients, and I don't know if it's premonition or what, but anytime I had a patient with tattoos, I would always have a conversation with them. It was like, well, how long have you had that? And it's like, I've had it for decades. Are you glad you got it? Well, not really. I mean, I can honestly say that, now these patients were older patients, but I can tell you that 100% of them said, I wish I hadn't done it. Now, that being said, there was one woman, and she was like 60 or whatever, and she had a solid breast tumor, and it was right underneath this giant rose tattoo with a stem on it and the whole 9 yards. And she was more concerned about, she said, well, I've got this tattoo now, I want it to really look good. And I said, like, well, the thing about it is I'm going to have to cut right over the tattoo because I can't cut around it and go make a tunnel to get the tumor, because if it's a cancer, it will drag cancer cells through the tunnel and it will spread the cancer locally, and I would be responsible for that. So I have to cut right over the rose. So I cut between like the rose and the stem. And I was just going like, this lady is obsessed with making sure this tattoo still looks great. So, I mean, I always try to make my patients beautiful anyway. I wanted them to have a great scar, because if they said like, who did that? You want to be
that
proud
was
of
like Dr. Steve's work. I'll have to get me one.
So anyway, once I got the tumor out, did a frozen section on it. It was benign, so thankfully that was good. But now came the part of putting that rose back together with the stem. So I got like suture that was just like fine as human hair, and I painstakingly put that stem back together exactly as it was. And what was funny was like she was in the recovery room, and I said, I really have good news for you, and this tumor was benign, there's no cancer. And her response is, what about the rose?
Oh my goodness.
So
10 years later, it'd be like some people where they have an eagle and then it looks like a pelican as they get down 10 years later, because age catches up with everybody.
I don't know what it is, but every tattoo on a woman that I've seen, they all get them on their breast. For whatever, I would think, as far as my practice went, it was the #1 spot,
Maybe that was the only area the guy was certified in.
I have no idea. He was just a breast tattoo specialist.
Yeah.
But then, after several decades, the thing's on the top of your shoe. So, so it's like, hey, I can put your rose back together for you, but if you want some other work done, if you want that restored back to what it was 30 years ago, you got some more work that needs to be done. But and it is crazy. And I told you yesterday, my father is 95 years old and was in the Coast Guard right after World War II. And anyway, one of his shipmates, they were stationed like in Boston, and they were getting ready to sail to Newfoundland. And before the guy, my father's shipmate, ever got on one of those big ships, he decided that he was going to get this giant battleship tattooed on his chest, and it's got and put "Sailing Home" underneath it. And he turned out, evidently, he was like the most seasick person in Coast Guard history, and so the Coast Guard just drummed him out. And the captain said, called him a bunch of different names, but Land Lover was in there somewhere. But
maybe you could have had it modified when on a cruise line or something.
I don't know, but it's just like one of the things I think that you have to ask yourself, why am I getting it? And then you have to go through that whole litany of questions for your tattoo artist. And then I think you really need to start looking at some of this, the research that's just now being put out about all of these different problems that may occur. And tattooing's been around for, I don't know, 3,000, yes, forever. And does everybody that gets a tattoo get cancer? No, they don't. There's a lot of different factors that go into all of that. But basically, if you're a live human being, anything is potentially carcinogenic. So anything can happen, between genetics and the environment and whatever you're exposed to. But if you're exposed to something that may be a known carcinogen and you're getting it injected into your dermis, you might want to rethink some of those things.
It's becoming more prevalent as society opens up as a whole to just any litany of different things that were either mental illness or crazy ideas that become mainstream now. And you can just look at the statistical numbers on, tattoos. And again, more and more people accepting it. It's probably 3 in 4 employers currently, with the latest research, is that they don't consider tattoos a negative when they go to get somebody gets hired or promoted. Now, depending on the profession you're in, that varies a little bit by the study, so that can hinder some. But the basic generational gaps are, like Gen Z, they about 4% of them have one tattoo, and 19% have multiple tattoos. Millennials, it's about 12% have one tattoo, and then it's 29% actually have multiple tattoos, which that's the biggest demographic with tattoos that's out there on the marketplace, at least here in the United States anyway. Generation X, about 14% of them have a tattoo, and then when you get to the baby boomers, about 6% of us have a tattoo. And so you can see where that comes. And when you look at Gen Z or millennials, that's the highest demographic for bringing tattoos actually into the mainstream and making it, as far as people's perception just being something that's done every day. And there's good issues and bad issues in that, and that's a matter, again, of personal preference, personal religious beliefs. But when you look at mainstream, a lot of people would see people with tattoos and they would just freak out, when they're going somewhere. You can walk into a Kroger's or a Myers or a Macy's or whatever it might be, a mall. Now, if you see someone walk in and we call it tatted up. If they're tatted up all over, you don't really think about it too much. You just go on about your business, where back in the day, they would have been a spectacle or a show. So it really shows the acceptance, especially here in the USA, because from a biblical standpoint, there are several issues, for people to look at. And I've done a lot of research on this because of being a Bible study teacher and also a student of theology, being Southern Baptist. We hear it all the time. Oh, you're not supposed to get tattoos. Oh, tattoos are a sin that you can never get rid of. Well, the Bible just doesn't talk like that. The biggest line, and I'm going to go, if you don't mind for a minute, Steve, about what the Bible has to say and stuff.
I'm going to tell you, one of the reasons I'm very interested is because one of my patients had a Jesus tattoo.
Okay, well, absolutely. And
so I'm just wondering, does that get you any points at the end of the day?
Well, if they were Hispanic, it would have been Senor Jesus. So, but looking back to looking at the biblical standpoint from like the English Standard Version of the USB Bible, if you look at Leviticus 19:28, and I'll put these up on a little chart also so you guys can see them. 19:28 says, and I'll make sure I quote this correctly so I don't paraphrase, I don't want to do that. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. I am the Lord. Now that was part of the Mosaic laws, and those were done at a time when the custom practices for pagans were to put idol gods and things that they worship on their body. So there's things to look at as a Christian. That doesn't mean that doing that is a sin for you. It just meant that if you look at it in the context of the date and time, that's what it meant. Now there are laws, like moral laws, that hold even to this day. There are dietary laws that have changed. during that time. So it's all in your Christian walk and what your church doctrine and what your belief system is. So if you look at, let's say 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20, again, English Standard Version, it says, or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price, so glory God in your body. And as Steve just said, somebody put Jesus on there. If Jesus, they're putting it on there to pay homage, I don't know where you say that that's wrong. I mean, again, that's a personal, if it hurts your walk in your Christian faith, if it hurts your salvation walk, if it hurts your witness to somebody, then that can be different. But that can also be a testimonial issue. Maybe you had some tattoos that at the time you got them, you weren't a Christian. So you got some obnoxious tattoos. Sins are all forgiven. That's what Jesus Christ died on the cross for. But you can also take those tattoos and use them as a symbolism for change if you need to. If you look at something like, let's say 1 Corinthians 10:23, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. So what that means is, again, if you're getting something and you want to, my daughter has a tattoo of her grandmother's birthday behind her ear. Being Southern Baptist, a lot of people are like, I don't know, that shouldn't be it. But we have many people in our church that are great people. They're solid Christians that have tattoos. You're not going to knock them or disband them just because of that. God's not really worried about that. He's worried more about your salvation and what you're doing to spread the gospel and, be a part of his kingdom. And then a lot of people say, well, look at Jesus. You mentioned that, Steve, a minute ago. So people say, Jesus had a tattoo or will have a tattoo. If you look at Revelation 19:16, again, English Standard Version, it says on there, on his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. People take certain things literal, but just like numbers, when we talk about 7 is a perfect number, 666 is the mark of the beast, those are illustrative purposes the same way. What that really does a lot of times is that talking about being on Jesus' thigh is a symbolic place, basically, where the hand would be placed for people to swear oaths or which signifies basically the fulfillment of God's promise as the judge of all time. So when you look at these things, you can talk to your minister, your pastor, your family members, see what they think from a biblical standpoint. But there is really nothing in the Bible, unless you're using the old Mosaic laws as your current law, which you would be Jewish then, to do that. So as long as it's not something that, like, you're going to Sunday school every week and teaching a kids class, and you decide you want to get a big devil thing up on your up on your upper torso, but you wear short sleeves or what I call white beater t-shirts, the little striped shirts, and then that shows, and you got some kind of satanic or some kind of off the wall, like death or whatever. That might be something you need to rethink. But there's a lot of areas. Again, does it hurt your walk? Does it hurt your community around you? There's a lot, because there are an awful lot of people who regret getting tattoos. I worked with several people over the years and have trained several people that have actually gotten the tattoos removed. And that's not an easy process, and we'll go into that at some point. And that's not painful process, because if you're getting the laser therapy done, that I know it's multiple sessions, because there was one young lady who was going to a conservative school that had to get a tattoo removed, and that tattoo ended up at least 8 or 9 sessions for her. And she would just come in with her arm, where she had it down her arm, because they wanted her to wear short sleeves in the summer. She had to get it removed, but it was so painful. She would be so sore, and she would say, I wish I would have got that, or I'd have put it somewhere else where one of my other tattoos. So there's a lot of things, as Steve was saying, to consider, both outside of the biblical look and the secular look. What do employers say? What does a future employer might say? And it is an individual thing, and that's fine. But you've also got to consider those around you, what it's going to do for the socioeconomic future of yourself and your family. And not saying it's bad. You know, some people are into it. You might walk into an interview for a promotion and your boss is tatted up more than you are. You don't know that. So, but in some professions, it's still frowned upon. So, you know, looking at it from a conservative standpoint. So I'm not here to tell you that it's a sin, because that's just not the way it reads to me. And everybody, like I said, some people might argue with me on this. That's fine. Send your comments if you want. I'll just read them, and I'll even get back with you on most of them. If I don't get back to you, it's because it was stupid. You know, basically, yeah, or idiotic. But if you want to have a conversation, I'm more than happy to have that. But from those standpoints, we wanted to bring it up from the medical standpoint. We also want to bring it up from, you know, like the secular standpoint and why it is so prevalent today. Because when you start hitting the $3 billion a year annual revenues, that's starting to become a big industry. You know, even 10 years ago, if you said, well, this industry does about $3 billion a year, that's a lot of money. Yeah. And so those, like Steve said, when you're actually poking under the skin and doing dyes and doing different things, it's more than time to regulate these things, even more so than they are. And I would think that most tattoo artists and legitimate tattoo parlors and places that are legitimate businesses would agree with that 100%.
It's very interesting because, you know, along those lines, when we were talking about, you know, what is actually in the ink, mm-hmm. and they're just now starting to discover all these things that are not regulated. They're finding more and more substances and that sort of thing. But a long time ago, it was a Secretary General of USA Volleyball for the United States volleyball team. They asked me about different supplements, and I just said, and they said, like, you know, obviously we want our athletes, you know, they're talking about the supplements that they take, and I just said, well, you know, the supplements are not regulated, and so you can look on the actual container, and maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not, that sort of thing. And most of the time, if there's any kind of errors, anything like that, most of the time they're just errors of omission or ignorance, and the fact that, you know, they didn't make a cut of, because they said, like, well, to put some sort of label on here, you need to meet a certain standard. You just didn't quite meet it, but you put it on the label anyway, and it's incorrect. So it goes on and on. But the bottom line is that they were asking me about these supplements, and I said, well, what I would do is, they were based in Colorado, is where they trained. And I said, get some of the supplements, buy them in LA, buy them in New York, buy them in Miami, and then have your labs test them and just see what happens. And they found 16 banned substances in those things. So it's like, if those athletes would have continued to take those supplements when they test before the actual Olympics, they would have tested positive
for one of the banned substances.
For one of the banned substances, and been kicked out after working yourself to death for years to train for that moment. And then, like, all of a sudden, you think that you're playing by the rules, but you've been taking all these banned substances and supplements that you didn't even know about. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're done. And here, this is a lot more serious here, because, you know, we're talking about one of the substances that seems to be ubiquitous among this tattoo ink, like polyethylene glycol, and that's like it's like a laxative that you give kids, and they're finding
it's
that
mixed into the ink.
Yes, and so they're finding that, and that long term has been shown to be associated with kidney disease. So the whole point of all of this is we want you to fully be aware of what you're putting in your body and what is being done to your body. Because I can promise you, you know, you just get one, and you have to take excellent care of it, because if you don't, it will really haunt you. It will come back and it will haunt you. And in the form of disabilities. And, you know, when people are in your teens and things like that, in your 20s, I mean, you just think you're invincible. You just think, like, oh, that old man doesn't know anything. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it's fine to have your own opinions and be free. That's great. But you've got to understand what's going on. And, I read this case in Germany, and they were, I had no idea I think that we were part of a kind of a breakthrough case at the time, but I had no idea. But I read this article in Germany, and they're talking about tattoo ink does enter the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system, going back to that, has lymph nodes in it, about 400 to 800 lymph nodes around that number. And they act as filters. That's what they do. And then they will take viruses, bacteria, foreign substances like ink, things like that. But we had it was about a 20-year-old white male, and he came to the office or to the clinic with a mass in his groin, and obviously very concerning because he was a very thin person, and this was a palpable mass. You could see it, let alone feel it, and it was a big solid mass. And we looked all over his skin because we thought like there was no evidence of any kind of skin cancer, or we found nothing on physical exam that we felt like could explain that. But we took him to the operating room, and when we opened up his groin, basically it looked like a black golf ball. And we just thought like, well, this kid's dead. This was in the 1980s, and just go like, he's got melanoma somewhere, and we can't find it, but here it is.
He's done.
Yeah, we felt like this kid's gonna die, and he's so we sent it to the pathologist for frozen section, and because we wanted to get like a diagnosis while he's on the table, because his family was out there waiting for the results, and we were going like, oh, this is really bad news. And then the pathologist said like it's tattoo ink. And so we looked, and the kid had a black barbed wire tattoo around his ankle, and it had gone from his ankle all the way to his groin. It had been carried through the lymphatic system, and it got trapped. The ink got trapped in his inguinal lymph nodes in the groin.
Wow.
And it was, we never had heard of anything like that or seen anything like that before. And the latest literature I read on was like 2017. I wish I'd have written the paper, but it was just a remarkable finding, because it looked exactly like some sort of melanoma had been trapped in his inguinal lymph nodes, and we thought like, this kid's probably going to die. But then when we told him, he could not believe that the tattoo ink had gone from his ankle all the way up to his groin. But it just shows you there's direct evidence of it, and it's not disputable that that got picked up by the immune system, and the white blood cells, and he underwent the whole response, the immune response, and then had that trapped in his lymph node. So it's there, and it is being deposited in your body. And some of these things they're talking about may be carcinogenic. What a terrible thing to do, to just get a tattoo and then you end up with a malignancy. And not everybody's gonna have that. Again, we're not saying that everybody that gets a tattoo is gonna get cancer. We're not saying that, and don't want to be interpreted that way. But it's just the fact of the matter is it could potentially happen to you.
Yes.
And so you really need to be aware of that, and you really need to think long and hard. And that's comes back to one of the things that this is where I'm going to get people to probably throw things at me or say bad things.
Well, they can throw them at their screens.
So they can, and won't bother me. But again, like I say, I'm at an age where, like I say, I'm having surgery on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I have to sign an informed consent, and it's like the doctor went over everything to expect, and what she told me exactly what she's going to do.
What complications could be?
Yes, the complications, the risks, the benefits. Here's what's going to happen if you don't have surgery. Here's what's going to happen if you do have surgery. And now granted, we are regulated like I've never seen anybody more regulated. Mm-hmm. And the fact, like, is the instruments being sterile, and what is being used on your body, and that sort of thing. But I signed the document because I was fully aware of what was going on, and I can't begin to tell you how many times I've talked to people with tattoos, and they just said, like, well, I was really drunk when I got that, and
I've witnessed that personally.
Yeah,
with friends.
Yeah. And my father, being in the service, his parents told him, even back then, they said, like, if you get a tattoo, just don't even bother coming home. They had that strong feeling about it. He did not get a tattoo. He told me, he said, don't get a tattoo. My son played pro baseball, and I told him, I said, do not get a tattoo. And a lot of his teammates obviously had tattoos. But this is what I feel should happen. And I feel that before a tattoo is placed on somebody's body, I know they have to sign documents and all that sort of thing, but I feel that a breathalyzer test should be required on everybody before they get a tattoo. And if there is a trace of alcohol found, then that person should come back another day, or they should be denied a tattoo that day. And if you get angry with me, you get angry with me. But the reason I say that, and people say, like, well, where are you going to stop? Are you going to do blood tests for cannabis and cocaine and all that sort of thing? No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, if you get a breathalyzer, and it should be documented of what that breathalyzer results showed, and if it showed no alcohol, you go with a tattoo, it's fine. I think it protects the consumer, and I think it protects the tattoo artist as well. Mm-hmm. So I think, but there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with that statement.
Oh no, you hear people, oh well, there's millions and millions of people that have tattoos that have never had an issue. Well, that might be so, and it might also be so you just don't hear about it. So, like you said, regulations, and I'm big on regulations, not overly regulated, but common sense regulations. So, making sure who the ink suppliers are, and I think they ought to regulate the ink suppliers for these tattoo places. They have to get it, and then there should be not just a code of standard, it should be a licensed, inspected, the FDA, whoever inspects this thing, these places that actually produce the materials for doing tattoos. Because like you said, some of these places, I'm sure, not everybody, like I said, but there are places that probably skimp on what they're using, and they're not, maybe they're getting their inks from somewhere where, they like the inks, but the inks aren't maybe the most legitimate brand in the world. So if that falls along with it. If you're documenting everything and your licenses, and places probably already do this, but you can just read incidents where the inks obviously got a long way to go as far as oversight. Mm-hmm. The same thing with the tattoos. All it does is make it more professional. It makes it more legitimate, even though it's gaining popularity, up to about 5% a year increase in their business. On average, that's quite a little increase over a period of time. When you figure in just 5 years, it's about a 25% increase in the growth of the industry. That's quite a bit. And we're not here to knock it. We don't want to cancel it, none of that, because there are people who get it for specific reasons. Like I said, my daughter got a basic one for her grandmother, who she was super close to, who passed away, and that was just her way of remembering her. And she knows my opinion on tattoos, and I don't push that on people. I just tell people you need to just think out several areas before you get one, and then whatever you're getting, to me, make sure it doesn't symbolize something that you worship. Memorial or remembrance is fine, But like Steve said, the cost benefit analysis is why I smiled a few minutes ago when you were talking about it. You've got to really get informed consent you got to know what the benefits are and what the potential consequences. Benefit, when you're with that lady right now, her name looks good, she's proud you got it. The consequences, what are you going to do after she's gone?
That's a fair question.
You know.
And one of the things too is that, the reason I say that is because, once that, the colorant and the carrier are injected into the dermis and the immune system kicks into place, you look at the B cells, or their lymphocytes, and they produce antibodies, and they also recognize antigens, which are foreign bodies, which would be tattoo ink in this case. But your B cell lymphocytes, they start being formed in the fetal liver, and then when you're born, they are formed in the bone marrow. And these cells, they start from hematopoietic stem cells, and they're made into B cells or lymphocytes. And so that's what we're talking about, lymphoma. And lymphoma is a blood cancer. And so we go back to this Lund University study about people having a 21% higher risk of developing lymphoma. And I want people to understand lymphoma is a blood cancer. And what happens is along the way is that there's several different kinds of blood cancers. But when you look at there's two that are specifically, they're brought more into the limelight in regards to this, is that diffuse large cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a very aggressive blood cancer. And it's treated with I think monoclonal antibody treatments and 3 different chemotherapy drugs. And then there's another type of lymphoma that's more associated with all this called follicular non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it's not as aggressive, but what can happen is the follicular non-Hodgkin's lymphoma can actually morph into the diffuse large cell, and which is more aggressive. And so you're looking at a 73% 5-year survival rate. So 27% did not live 5 years. So we're talking about living and dying. Mm-hmm. And so to ask somebody to say, I think they need to have a breathalyzer done to show that they are of sound mind when they're getting this done. It protects them. It protects the tattoo artist. And, in my opinion, as a physician, first and foremost, I'm always concerned about somebody's well-being. And if we can do this and save one life, or keep one person from getting cancer, then hey, it's worth it.
It is.
It is worth it.
You have a right, I think, and you should ask, can I see any of the lab studies on the inks that you use? And then, is that a reputable lab? Is it just a lab? And I don't want to tick off the people in the CBD industry, but there's an awful lot of this that went on during the big CBD craze. The gummies and the oils and the sublingual drops that you use. People were, and I know multiple people around here, even some students and friends that come in, hey, you should buy this and this product and this product and this product, and it does work. I'm here to tell you, because some of the rubs I've used for ailments for my family and for our dogs who are seniors, they really do work. However, you got to make sure that this stuff is from a credible source, because there were 2 or 3 of the different brands that were off brands here they came from a farm that only used top quality according to their labs. Well, when you call and get the labs, at first they don't want to give you the name of the lab. Then if they gave you the name of the lab, there's nothing. When you go to the lab's website, it's like a shell company. There was nothing there, and I said, you're trying to sell this to people and put this out as it's the purest, it's the most authentic and the best potency. but your lab results are horrific. So, but if you get with a credible source or a credible company, they'll have all the, like the USDA and the FDA lab results, and they actually test them. Same thing should be done, and I know people might argue with us, those two coots know what they're talking about, but we don't care. But there should be a regulation to make sure, because it's not just you that's being affected, it's your loved ones, you know, it's your family, your spouse, your kids, you know, the people in your community. If it's something where one bad place that's doing, a few of them can, you know, cause all kinds of health risks on somebody if they're not following the procedures and not kept up on.
My wife and I were talking one day, and we were just like, the subject matter of tattoos came up, and I just said, like, well, you know, if I got one, since I'm a martial artist or whatever, you know, I think it would be cool to have like a big green dragon kind of thing. And she said, like, well, for me, I would get a birdhouse. I said, that's a bit unusual, you know, a birdhouse. I mean, I'd get a bird, but a birdhouse. But you know, that was what she wanted. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because
were you going to be the bird? And she says, this is house is specifically built for cuckoos.
But one day I was kind of like found one of those tattoos that's not permanent.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's
the
not
temporary
permanent.
tattoos.
Yeah, the temporary tattoos. So it was this giant green dragon, and I gotta say, you know, it was pretty cool looking, pretty cool. So, long story short,
no, you did.
I had it put on my left cheek. So, and I didn't say anything to her about it. You know, I didn't say anything to her about it. I just told her, she just knows that, like, if I ever got a tattoo, it would be a green dragon kind of thing. So I was coming out of the shower, and she saw me, and she absolutely screamed bloody murder. And I said, it's only temporary. You know, but I told her at first, I said, oh, well, you know, we talked about this, and so I just went down and had it done. I just wanted to surprise you. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You know, and then I told her, I said, it's just temporary. But I gotta say, it was kind of cool. And so, see, we're not so bad. But yeah. the thing is
a little off, maybe.
But you know, we just want to make sure that you know what you're getting. And the way this looks right now, you don't have a complete picture as to what you're getting. And the FDA has not approved any inks at all.
Which is what should be regulated nationwide, not just in one state has this set of regulations, one state has this, another state has this. There should be a nationwide regulation of how the instruments that are used, the needles, the equipment, how everything's sterile and how it's used, just like a dentist or podiatrist or whatever. They have to have new sterile instruments every time, how they're sterilized, the stuff that they use is all sealed, the inks that they use are approved and, you know, certified inks, and if that makes I'm not really familiar what the total cost of certain tattoos are, but if that makes the cost go up a little bit, so be it. You'd rather have that and knowing what's going on than you would somebody injecting something into your body that, you know, may come back to haunt you, like Steve was talking about that young man, because that would be a horrific experience.
Yeah, and then, you know, you can tie it into, you know, healthcare costs, because like if someone gets a tattoo and gets an infection, or you know, HIV or hepatitis, or they get a cancer. I mean, look at the results of that.
Oh yeah,
of the cost. So not only, you know, just realistically with human beings, when you look at costs, you're looking at mental, physical, financial. I mean, they're all just tied.
Well, look at people who get earrings and piercings.
Yeah.
Again, not knocking the industry, but I had a student who got an ear piercing. She was younger. She came in the next day and to class, and I said, "Do you know something wrong with your ear?" And her mom didn't really pay attention. Her ear was swollen and blood red. Come to find out, the young lady that had done the piercing used the same piercing tool without cleaning it, and somehow that got infected, and they had to put her on antibiotics. That was a mess. Her ear was a mess for about a week, and she was in severe pain. You couldn't even touch it, couldn't do anything, and I felt so sorry for that young lady, and she was only about 11 years old. But her mom wanted to get her for her birthday, get one, and I said, I would definitely just not go to, like, not knocking you 7-Eleven, but I would not go to 7-Eleven or Jane's House of Wax and Weaves to get that, unless I know that they're certified or something.
And another thing too, that you can get methicillin resistant staph from this as well. And so there's a myriad of bacterial and viral potential problems, but the one that's raising the flag right now is the lymphoma. And
that
now,
really the one that scared you.
yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, the others, I mean, obviously can kill you as well, because hepatitis can be a deadly disease, and we know HIV can be a deadly disease, and we know cancer can be a deadly disease. And so we're looking at all of these things that are under the tattoo umbrella, if you will, potentially, that could happen. And we're just saying, like, know all of this before you sign that paper and bare your skin, because you really need to have a true informed consent. And that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah. Well, you got our 2 cents worth from many different angles, and again, we just want you to be happy, but be safe and be healthy. So until the next time, have a great one.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Franken Steve Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit follow or subscribe on the link provided so you can stay up to date on new episodes. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.